world of fear, now more than ever, we need the guts for real conversations about real issues that matter. And we so desperately need real connection. Welcome to Brave Conversations with me, your host, Leigh Sloan.
Hey everybody, today on this episode of Brave Conversations, we're going to be exploring the topic of singleness. Now, I had no idea, being a married person, I had no idea that I looked up how many people were single in America, how many adults are single, and it's a little over 50% of adults today are actually single. And I thought about how many sermons in churches we might hear about singleness, and I thought relatively few based on the fact that most people are actually living this single journey. And so I thought it would be really good to get some of my friends who are single, or one of them used to be single, talking about what this journey has been for them and really getting perspective for those of us who are married, and for those of you who are single, that you can really know that God is with you on this journey and really get some tips on how to handle it. So I've invited my friends Dan, Natasaia, and Jaclyn to join us in this brave conversation. Hope you enjoy.
So you just want to tell us a little bit about your journey and how it's a very unique story. So I'll just let you launch right into it.
Yeah. So, a lot of times, for me growing up or, coming into my adulthood, all around me as I was growing up, I saw my friends getting into relationships in high school, as young adults. But, I never really felt a need to do that. Certainly, if I look back to while I was in high school, it was never something I was really interested in. It was only after I became a Christian and started getting involved in church in my 20s that things really started changing. What happened is I kind of got swept up with what I really perceive in hindsight to have been an expectation of a certain kind of behavior, especially as a young single man.
Okay.
I ended up pursuing or wanting to pursue relationships, dating relationships, romantic relationships, marriage, whatever, not because I truly wanted it, but looking back, it's because it was what I was taught I should want.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Were you attracted to women, or was it just something that was placed upon you?
Yeah, I was. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Go on.
Yep. But I never really felt the draw to be involved in a relationship per se.
Okay. Even in dating, right?
Even dating, yeah. But I ended up in that awkward position where it was like, this is what you're supposed to do. And, not being, my heart wasn't really in it, so to speak.
Yeah. You wanted connection with people, but not necessarily, you didn't need a romance, right?
Right. But based on, what I was being taught by people around me, it was like that's what I should want and I should be doing.
Okay. So you dated a few times, or you tried to?
Yes.
Okay.
It did not work out well.
Okay. And yeah. So what did you learn from that?
I learned a lot about myself. Ultimately, over the course of several years, I learned that it's really not what I was called to do. After a long string of, I don't even want to so much say failures looking back. It sure felt like time, but just to look back at it now,
Mm-hmm.
it was learning experiences to learn more about myself and who I am. But
So what was God really calling you into then?
so I had ended up, I remember the day that the day it happened is I was just frustrated, angry, depressed about what was going on, and I was asking God, why does this keep happening? Every single time I find myself in this situation where I think this is what I want. I think that I want to I want to be married,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And, he spoke to me and said, that's not what I created you for. Not what I called you to. And all of a sudden, it started clicking. It started making sense. There had been several pastors and group leaders over the years who just kind of out of nowhere must have had some level of discernment and asked me here and there, do you feel like you might be called to celibacy? And my answer was always no. How could I if I want a relationship, if I want marriage so badly? Which, yeah, at the time, I strongly believed that's what I wanted.
So how do you distinguish the difference later on between that's not what I wanted to this is what you thought you wanted?
I had to look back at my whole life and remember some of those interactions I had as a teenager. Before all the kind of teachings set in, as far as what I wanted, and remembering that I didn't want those things. I didn't want a relationship. And
so you say the church influenced you toward a false kind of wanting, in a sense, or feeling like you had to?
Yeah, that's kind of how I would classify it.
Interesting. So then you decide now you're going to be committed to celibacy, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And since I reached this point a few years ago, it's only gotten more and more of a firm conviction over the years that that's what I was created for. That's what I was called to, is a life of celibacy. You don't hear a lot about it in the churches. The Catholic and Orthodox traditions, it's spoken highly of, but not so much outside that world.
Right. And I think Protestants, especially, and being in the church ministry world, I remember the time when I got married, and I remember feeling this shift from being kind of second-class single citizen church to now she's married, so now it felt like I had a new life in the church, and all I did was
there's definitely a difference there in terms of how people in the church interact with you, how even subconsciously.
So how do you deal with, you said, the attractions to women or things like that you might have as a normal man would, how do you go about that?
Well, part of that is just learning my identity and who I am. And, as I've grown in this identity of a man called to a celibate life, it's become much easier as the last few years have gone on, as I've just accepted that identity and grown. It's not something that I have a temptation for per se anymore. I
pursuing intimacy with God is plenty for you.
Yes, and with other people in the context of friendship.
Yeah, and that's important to cultivate those friendships, I'm sure, huh?
Yes, absolutely, because as a single person, not just as a single person, but as a single person who knows, hey, this is how I'm going to be the rest of my life. You lose a lot of that worldly support structure there that married people with families otherwise would have.
Yeah. It's interesting that in our culture we have all these options of what you can be sexually, and celibacy usually doesn't come
Yeah.
up
Yes.
as an
Yes.
option. And so
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
I wanted to bring you on to show people like there are people out there doing this.
yeah. That if you don't want sex, that's okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's a permission
that
granted, right?
it's a wonderful thing in the context of marriage, but yeah, it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
And yeah, marriage isn't for everybody either.
yeah.
It's a wonderful thing that God created, but it's not for everybody.
And I can't help but wonder how many people go into marriage, assuming that it's for them when maybe
Right.
it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, I really appreciate your testimony. I appreciate your bravery in sharing about this publicly. And I think it's just going to bring a lot of hope to people. And maybe some people will resonate with you
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
are.
The Hansel's comment here: in today's world, if you don't want sex, then you are a heretic. Absolutely. That's basically what the perception is.
Has
Not
sex
just
become our religion then?
in the world at large. You talk, break room talk amongst friends that say, you, as a young single man, if you don't want sex, you look like you're green with two heads.
Yeah. Right. And it's not that you're not a normal man either. That
Right.
It's just that you've chosen a different lifestyle, and God's given you that ability. He's given you that gift.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. He's given me that strength to see it and to live it out.
And do you feel like it was sort of like it came upon you, like you received a calling that you decided to embrace?
I think so, yeah. It's not like, I wouldn't say that I received the calling in that moment, but that's when I finally accepted it.
And then you felt empowered because of it after you
Yes,
accepted it?
because like I said, there were some people here and there in the church that recognized that calling in me, that even when I didn't.
Yeah. And then, of course, they're able to validate it.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Out.
Now, the last few years, since I've accepted that and chosen to live it out, has been the happiest, most fulfilling time of my life.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember the day you told us what your decision was, and you were elated. I mean, just a weight was off you.
That's exactly what it was. It was a huge weight off my chest.
Awesome. Well, good to hear it, Dan. Thanks so much.
I loved hearing from Dan and his unique journey in this calling to celibacy. Celibacy is kind of like a word you hardly ever hear nowadays. And we hear about singles, single life is one thing, but single life with celibacy and with that being the goal, I think we need to start talking about a little more, because if we're going to remain true to God's word, if we're going to pursue sexual purity, celibacy, I think, has to be an option that's on the table instead of something that is just made fun of or something that is less than. I think we really need to honor people who are taking that step to say, hey, I'm going to live this as a lifestyle. And, just really to honor that as a choice. It's not a choice for everyone. It is a gift. But I think that maybe if we start recognizing celibacy as a valid way to live, that it will give the world options that, our sex-saturated culture has not given anyone that option of celibacy. And so I hope that you can have more of these conversations and help people understand that this is really a valid way of being, that you're not less than, that you can still do great things, and God can actually work through you in some ways to a greater degree because you have that freedom of remaining single. So I just hope that you stop and think about that, read some scriptures about that, and begin to change our thinking in the church around this idea of celibacy. The next guest I have for you is Natasaia, and she has had this lifestyle of going from a kind of just loose attitude toward sexuality. She actually was on a reality TV show and program before she really totally committed her life to the Lord. And so I just want you to hear from her journey, from kind of this everything goes attitude towards sexuality to really committing herself to the Lord and to really dating, so to speak, God first, and how she's still on that journey toward finding who she really belongs with ultimately. And so enjoy this talk with Natasha.
Give us a little synopsis of your story with your single journey.
My single journey has been very interesting because I've been single for years. But over the years, it's been revealed that it's just because I never trusted myself to really be in a relationship. But God kind of, called me to celibacy 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It took me about 2.5 years to completely get to that place of cooperating with what he was saying 100%. But it has been very interesting in unlocking what it means to be single for real. And not just with what society says is single, but really being alone, having that time to really cultivate you.
So define those terms about what society defines as single, what you mean by celibacy. It's a temporary celibacy, right?
Yes. Because so I'm abstinent. Like I'm abstaining until marriage. Yes. Yes.
So then what does the world define as singleness? What's the single life is about?
The single life nowadays is more so about like YOLO, you only live once, get out here and, sleep with who you want to. You don't owe nobody anything, do whatever it is you want to do. That's really what singleness is.
Mm-hmm. And was there a time where you bought into that?
My whole life. Yeah.
Yeah.
My whole life. Like, that's how I've lived my whole life. Like, I don't answer to nobody, I'm just doing me. Don't nobody owe me nothing. I don't need no explanation, and I don't owe you one. So, yeah.
So what did that do to your soul, your well-being?
Girl. What I did not take into account was how big of a difference it was making within me, because giving something away, like as precious as my body, like my body is sacred and it is mine. And we forget that we are spiritual beings wrapped in flesh, and everything that we do in our flesh interacts with our spirit as well. And every time that you interact with someone on the physical level, you interact with them on a spiritual level as well. So you have to take that into account, and you are giving away a piece of you every time you go in and out of these sexual encounters. Just as much as there are sexually transmitted diseases on the flesh, there are sexually transmitted diseases in the spirit, and they may not be entitled the same thing, but there is things that you can contract, and there are things that you can give away that you are now responsible for not having because it was yours in the beginning. And now you have to figure out how to not only get that back, but give back everything that you took in the process as well. My identity, I gave away a lot of my identity in sex. God was showing me how things that were said to me in childhood were living itself out in my day-to-day life, and I didn't realize. At one point in my childhood, and I say this with the utmost respect, so I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but one point in my childhood, my mother said something to me along the lines of, you won't be good for anything but laying on your back. And it was something that I unconsciously believed. As an 8-year-old child, you don't comprehend what it means, but you believed it without knowing even the meaning behind it. And when God unlocked that, and I mean, he just fully told me that, I believed it like, not even a week ago. And I mean, I broke down and I was like, Lord, what? But at this point, I had truly walked into my celibacy, like really walked into, Lord, I'm abstaining and it's good. Like, I don't have, people always say, oh, do you get horny? And I'm like, I'm flesh, of course, but it's not so much about being horny. It's more so about being like, this is what my flesh is saying. And then I then in turn be like, okay, that's interesting. And then I give it back. I give it back to where it came from. And I'm like, Lord, that was interesting. So this is going to be interesting when, because me and God have some deep conversations. I talk to Jesus about everything, even about being horny. Yes. And people don't understand. They be like, you talk to Jesus? Yes, I do. Like I do.
Yeah.
And if he's the one who's going to send me a husband, then, and Jesus straight up told me when I said, Jesus, look, if this is really what we're going to do, then, and I laid down some ground rules, and Jesus was like, and I was trying to be like, Jesus, you don't, like, and Jesus looked at me, he said, baby, I made you. I know what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, now look, but I trust him. I really do.
Yeah.
Like, he's proven to me. And I know a lot of people aren't religious or don't have a spiritual journey or whatever, but everyone's look different. And for me, mine was giving my body back to God, because what he needed to unlock, what he needed to give me back, and he was giving me back my identity. And that's one of the main things that I needed to walk into my journey. And yours may not be sex. My friend just started his journey on identity, and the first thing God was like, look, I need this, and his wasn't nowhere near close to mine. Everyone's going to be different.
Yeah. So how do you feel and act, and how are you different now, looking at life this different way than you did before? I mean, are you feeling differently?
I am so free. I have never felt so free in my life, because, and I say that meaning every situation I step into, I'm not checking out every guy, seeing if he like, and I've never been the type anyway, like, to really seek out attention, but for like, I'm not paying attention to to those situations and looking for that. I'm not looking for that validation from any other person. I am legitimately owning myself and my skin and living in who I am. And when someone does approach me, or when a guy does approach me for any kind of like dating or anything of that nature, I'm very honest. And within the first conversation, the first thing that comes up is, oh, and just so you know, I am celibate until I'm married. And that knocks out any drama so therefore I don't have to deal with guys that are just trying to get in your pants. Like, and that is the dopest, because, it's like, oh, well, I'm not sleeping with you for the first 3-4 dates. Oh, a guy will hold out for 3-4 dates.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, okay, I ain't worried about it. I can hold out. But when you tell them you waiting until marriage,
empowerment anyway.
And that's the crazy part. That's the crazy part. That's our power.
Right. I mean, it feels like our society, it's not that sex is bad, but it's so sex saturated and focused that it kind of, you lose your own power to it. Like, you got to surrender your own self to this god of sex.
Yeah, basically.
It suddenly puts it in perspective to where it's a part of life, but it's not like the main part.
Yeah, it's not a need. Like, no, it is a need.
Yeah.
It's not a, it shouldn't be a deciding factor. It should not decide your life, especially before you truly know who you are, where you're going. That shouldn't decide anything other than, and I remember and when I tell you, how real I am. So when I tell you, I've had some real conversations with Jesus, like, we really get, and I'll be like, Lord, no, because look, this is how it is, and this is what I feel, and he's like, sweetheart, you don't have to describe sex to me. I know it's good. I made it. Everything I made is good, and it's legitimate that he's like, I know, I get it. It is legitimately just him trying to give it to us in the sanctity of what he created it for. And that is a union, because you literally can become one with somebody, and you need to make sure that everybody you becoming one with is somebody you willing to be one with.
Right. Now, I want to bring something up that I've been thinking about with that scripture when Jesus says, as a man lusteth in his heart, there's different scriptures that say that it's just like you've committed adultery in your heart, correct? And we have different versions, different interpretations of that scripture. But recently I've just come to understand that scripture is actually more about coveting after someone else. Okay. Coveting is a different thing than just having this
Mm-hmm.
physical reaction or whatever. But I think the church has been so focused on, oh my gosh, I accidentally had a feeling. And it trips us up, because then we
Mm-hmm.
identify and say that I am my feeling, not I am the sin. You know, like if you're going after something, if it's really in your heart to go after it, that's what Jesus was talking about, not
Yeah.
my accidental, oh, I was attracted to this person and I had this
Right.
one thought, right?
Right.
Don't you feel like that
Mm-hmm.
trips us up?
Oh, all the time. I feel like a lot of we get so caught up on conversations, the meaning behind the words, and a lot of meanings behind words have gotten lost in translation. And that's one of the things. To covet and to lust is completely different. And to lust, like, like to think something looks good is not the same thing as coveting it. Like going home and, when David looked at Bathsheba, that wasn't the sin. The sin was that he went back in his house and kept thinking about it, then was like, you know what? Who is she? Where her husband at? That's where it became
Yeah.
the problem.
Right. That
You
should
can
be
let a
mine.
thought pass through. Yeah, you should let a thought pass. You can let a thought pass through your head. Don't mean that you have to own it
Right.
and let it fester. That's where it becomes a
Yeah.
problem.
And that's why somebody can look at you and say, okay, you like men. I mean, you would like to be in a relationship. It's not like you don't have this desire, but
Mm-hmm.
you're submitting that desire to God, and you're saying this is possible to live free from this. And
Yeah.
when God brings the right person, that's awesome.
Yeah, because honestly, it is not like, I haven't given anything up. I've gained something. I don't feel like I've lost anything. I have gained so much in this. And it's crazy, the freedom that comes with it. And the I don't need to please anybody. I don't need to prove to anybody anything, because I know, like, I don't have to wonder. Like a
Right.
lot of people try and tell you, especially like, oh, well, you go, like, what if your husband isn't walking down this journey that you're walking? Oh, he will be. He will be. Now, well, how do you know? Oh, because God knows me. He knows me. He knows me. He knows me better than I know me. And a little bit I know that the husband that they come to me, he better be stronger on this journey than I am.
Right. And if
He
you're
better
in a
be walking in it.
if you're already in a relationship where they're getting something out of you, right, then you don't know what the true
Nope.
intention there is. How can you
Nope.
really know if you're already giving that
Yeah.
away?
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
You really can't. I mean, I told you this last time we spoke. I had a guy actually straight tell me, you're amazing. I mean, for the first time ever, I've had conversations with someone that I would say, I would love for you to meet my mom. But he's like, but what it would take to keep you. I can get something not as good and pay a whole lot less. And right now where I'm at, I'm not willing to pay what it would require. And I
Wow.
said,
Good.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. When you know your worth, baby, you won't let nobody pay no less than what you're worth.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
That's really good. Now there's a lot of other things we can talk about with singleness, and do you have to find yourself that you need to really intentionally pursue relationships with people to where
No.
how's that go for you?
Where I'm at, I'm learning how to have loving relationships with people, period. Because everything prior to marriage should be above the neck. And I should be able to have that kind of relationship with everyone in my life. And that is where I'm at. I'm learning to truly love people at the core of me, being willing to be wrong and being willing to make sacrifices in my friendships, make sacrifices in these relationships, just regular relationships, and your courtship will be a regular relationship until it's
Right.
marriage. And that's what he's teaching me right now, like walking this thing out, making sacrifices for the people I call a friend.
Right. So you're saying
And it,
your standard for friendship has gone up as well because
my
of that.
standard for being, like, if I showed you the back of my door, it would be like, you would be like, what? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I have 8 like notes, like things posted on the back of my room door, 8 titles that I wear that have now improved because of the transformation of the definition that I carry for
Mm-hmm.
myself. It has made me a better daughter. It is making me a better sister. It is making me a better friend. It will make me a better mother. It will make me a better wife. It will make
Mm-hmm.
me a better Christian. Like, all of these things that we begin to label ourselves with,
Yeah.
that thing, that was what was holding me back. And that is
Wow.
where now I'm like even elevating my understanding in all of these areas of my life
Right. And
because of it.
so your life is holistic now. It's not just about one or two little things. It's about your life. And you
Yeah.
can look at your life as a whole.
Hmm.
Imagine that
It's not
God.
about satisfying a quick need that really don't get me nowhere. Like I'm getting what, maybe 15, 20 minutes of pleasure that's not gonna benefit me in any other area, but to subdue that one pleasure and give that one thing up
Mhm.
and grow in 8 areas,
Yeah.
which is more important.
Yeah. That's really good. And it's really great that you're able to talk about it. That, like I said before with Dan, this seems to be like an unheard of thing that we don't
Yeah,
talk about enough. And so I want to give people hope that people of all types are pursuing this with God's help. So
yeah,
thanks for being a
yeah.
light.
You're like, it is my pleasure. It's something I never thought I would ever be talking about. But
Mhm.
yeah, if he can do it for me, he can do it for anybody, I promise.
Yeah.
He's teaching me, like, a lot of people are like, well, how do you go from having sex to just not? And what happens if, and what if your husband's bad in bed? And what happens if you marry somebody
Mhm.
who don't know? And God has taught me, like, he's deleting my memories. He's deleting the
Mhm.
things and it's like a renewing. And he's like, don't worry about it. And I
Mhm.
was like, are you sure this is what you said? And I went to the singles conference, and one of the pastors there was like, if you hold on to expectations, you will put that over your mate, and that's unfair. And so
Mhm.
he's just proving that constantly, that you make this sacrifice, I'll do way more than you can ever dream or imagine.
Yeah. I know that happened to me. I held out for a good one.
Yeah, look at you.
Yeah.
And now, like, like life is good. Life is so good. Life
Yeah.
is so good. I can't even imagine going back.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. It's been
It
great.
is my pleasure. It is my
Well,
pleasure
I'm sure we'll
anytime.
talk to you some more sometime.
Oh, yeah, I will be here.
I love this idea and really the reality that God created sex and He created it to be enjoyed. But we don't have to wrap our whole lives around sex. Sex is supposed to be an extra, an expression of who we are, but it's supposed to be a small expression. And it's not supposed to completely engulf our lives. And so I love how Natasha shared about her journey to really put it in perspective that we are meant to be whole people, and in the right context, sex can be just a celebration of that. And so I hope that gave you something to think about, something to ponder and pray about. You really can't do this thing right without partnering with God in this experience of sexual holiness. And you know what? It's not purity until marriage, it's purity from A to Z throughout your whole entire life. When you are married, purity is still an issue. So I just want you to remember that, think on that, ponder on it, and ask the Lord to really do a work in your heart to make you a whole and complete person. Today I wanted to ask Jaclyn to come on here because she has a different perspective. I thought, how could we talk about singleness without talking about single parenting? And she's been a single parent for a little while now. She's no longer single. So we'll see if she can give us some little nuggets and just help us understand the life of a single mom. And maybe you are a single mom and you'll just hear her voice, hear her heart, and see how she follows God while as a single person.
Hello, how are
Hey.
you?
Good. How are you?
How was your day? A busy day?
Actually, no, not really.
No?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. It's been pretty relaxing.
Well, yeah, so can you just go ahead and start out by telling us kind of the circumstances around you becoming a single mom?
Sure. So I became a single mom so my father passed away when I was 17, and about 2 weeks later is when I found out I was pregnant, and thankfully I was able to finish high school early, so I didn't have to deal with going through high school pregnant. But I had my son at 18, and I was technically a single parent at about 2.5 months pregnant, and up until my son was 2.5 years old. So a little over 3 years, I guess. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was it a smooth transition? Was it really difficult for you? Somewhere.
Honestly, I would say that was the most challenging season of my life. I mean, being so young and, man, losing your parent at the same time.
Yeah.
I felt like my world was falling apart, and I was really confused. I knew, of course, I wanted to keep the baby. That was never a doubt, but it was more of like, I don't know what I'm in for. And it was extremely tough, but it's also when I truly came to the Lord. So I got saved in middle school, but I didn't really know anything about what it meant to be saved and to follow Christ until I hit rock bottom, and I needed him. So
yeah. When would you say that point was?
So when my dad passed away, my brother and I made a point to go to Abbott Loop Church every week together. And I was just so new at all of that. My family and I had gone to church throughout my life, but not very consistently. And I was raised in a Christian home, but just not, it wasn't very, it wasn't really part of our routine growing up. And so when my brother and I started going together, is kind of when I started to get knit into a community. And that's kind of where I learned what it even meant to be a Christian and trust God and, all of that. So I would say it was before I was 18, but it was right when I became a single mom was really when things got really messy because I felt abandoned and alone,
Yeah.
So.
And probably like you had to grow up really fast and.
Yeah, very fast.
Not having your dad, not having, just being a mom. And there's nothing like having someone just dependent on you like that.
Yeah, but, for sure. It's actually, what I'm most thankful for about it, though, is I learned what sacrificial love is. And to give up your own desires. Like, I mean, I was only 17, 18, but even when you're pregnant, you are a parent because you have to make choices that are benefiting the baby, even when they're not out here. And so, and it's not easy. You have to, even little things like what you want to eat, you can't do that. And, so.
Was it hard not to just want to like fall into the arms of someone just to kind of rescue you out of that? Or did you even have that thought?
Of course, I did definitely struggle with it. But as time went on, and once Jaden was born, my goal was to give him the best life possible. And so I definitely struggled in wanting to belong and be accepted and be loved, and I wanted my son to be loved by somebody, and I made mistakes, and I didn't really date very much or anything like that, and I felt really awkward too. It was hard for me to kind of accept for a while, that I was a different circumstance than other people my age.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was very thankful because it kept me from partying, kept me from drinking like everyone else around me was. It kept me from really slippery slopes that I found really silly. But at the time, it was like I also felt left out. So it was a battle. But looking back, I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah. Do you think that before you got married, you kind of, was there a period in time where you kind of just gave the whole relationship thing to the Lord, or did you go through any kind of changes in your heart about getting remarried, married again?
Well, I was never married.
I'm sorry, married for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually reached a point right before meeting my husband, Josh, where, and I didn't quite remember this, but my friend who I'm very close with reminded me of a conversation I had with her where I was just completely content with just like the Lord was my spouse and he was my father too. Like, one thing that really bonded me to Jaden was we both were fatherless, and it was a very unique connection. I feel that not everyone gets to experience the same way that he and I both did, even though he was a baby. So he didn't really know, but I knew. And so I did reach a point, and it was for a while where I wasn't searching. I just kept journaling and praying about who I wanted to father my son and be a part of my life and marry. And God actually when I looked over my list of little requests that I just thought were silly, but I was just in prayer mode, and he answered all of my prayers with who I married. And so that part of surrendering your desires to the Lord is very challenging, but very, very worth it. He's very faithful.
Yeah, but definitely. So as far as the perceptions from other people, was there anything that you struggled with as far as that, or is there anything that you would want people to know about single moms that maybe they assume differently?
Yeah. So one thing. So when it came to my family, when I had to tell my family I was pregnant, I got a lot of closed doors. Basically, most of my relatives didn't talk to me. My grandparents on my father's side, still haven't spoken with him. And I did get some comments, some backlash in really difficult times where I was told, like, your dad would be so disappointed in you and stuff like that. So going through that at the same time as grieving, and now trying to figure out, like, what am I even doing? What's my purpose anyways? And feeling like I totally screwed over myself or my life and this baby, But, I mean, trusting in God in that is what anchors your soul, where you're like, He's got it. He's got it under control for me. And He redeems all mistakes.
Yeah.
So there was that. But as far as peers, when I actually lost a lot of friends because I was no longer I didn't really do what most kids did in high school anyways, but the fact that I was no longer an option to invite to do things, just kind of weaved out a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I had a couple of close friends stick by me, and that was really helpful. The church community was the biggest part, I would say. I was very dependent on my spiritual family, and to this day, I mean, they stick closer than blood. So that was important. And I don't remember the second part of your question. Is there?
Well, what would you want people to know about single moms that maybe they assume differently?
Oh, well, one thing I would say, if you've ever come across a single mom, whether they're pregnant, young, teenagers, older, whatever, I would say to everyone out there, do not discourage them, because naturally you're already feeling weight. sorry, my mom just walked down. You're already feeling discouraged and afraid. And what makes it harder is people looking down on you anyways, even when you're already kind of looking down on yourself. And so I would say if you come across somebody, encourage them and lend a helping hand for sure. Yeah. On top of that, I mean, if you are a single parent, I would say don't give up and just remember that what you're doing is so important, whether you're a believer or not. I mean, raising kids is such a huge gift, and it really taught me a lot about myself and what issues I had growing on from my childhood, and how I wanted to do things differently for my own family. And I mean, I don't know. I know people go through that healing process without having kids, but I don't think it would have been at the accelerated rate that it was at. I mean, being almost 22, I feel so much more whole than I probably would if I hadn't had Jaden or gone through the seasons that I did. And the other thing is I would just remind all single parents that it's a season and it passes, and to just kind of embrace it and learn everything you can.
What would you say to somebody who's pregnant but they don't know, if they're not sure if they can keep the baby or if they're capable of, mothering, bringing a kid?
That's a tough one. I didn't think I could do it, but sticking to it, I mean, I would say at least try. I don't really know, because once you have the baby, I feel like you're kind of attached.
I mean, and you think about the people who give up their babies and to adoption, and that I can imagine that would be a really hard thing to do, but also a really brave thing. They feel like they can't,
Yeah, it is. I would say it takes a lot of strength and humility to realize, like, if you really can't do it, the humility in saying, in acting on that, and letting someone else who really wants to and believes that they can do it, I'd say that's a really beautiful thing. But if you're just kind of on the fence, or you're really young in high school or however old, but you want to keep the baby, I would just say, you get equipped as you go. So I don't think anybody really knows what they're doing. You just kind of figure it out.
I remember when I brought home a baby, I did not feel equipped. And I had taught school for years, but no.
My first day home with Jaden, I was alone at the hospital most of the time, and then my first day bringing him home, I was home alone too, and I don't know, he's just, mommy mode just kind of kicks in your instincts, and you just kind of, I feel like the Lord just, it's embedded in you for the most part. Not for everybody, of course, but
and you get that community around you. The community of support helps too, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I learned so much going to Thrive at Abbott Loop when I was able to. Just getting around other moms is so important, especially if you feel like you don't know what you're doing and you just feel like you're failing over and over. You realize that everyone kind of feels that way, and so it's encouraging. And you learn from moms who are have older kids or grandparents or whatever. You learn so much, and it's so helpful. It's really just nice to know that you're not alone in it. There's always somebody out there who is feeling the same way you are and needs your support too. You just have each other to lean on.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story, because now people can sense that. They can know that they're not alone. And a commercial for Thrive. Thrive is at Abbott Loop. Is it on Wednesdays?
Yeah, I think so. Wednesday mornings.
Okay. Well, contact Abbott Loop if you are interested in Thrive, a mom's group. And also, you do childcare in your home, right?
Yes.
So she said she has one more opening. So a lucky child.
Yeah,
You can take
so my son's 3.5 now, and so I'm doing more preschool stuff, but I have a couple of kids who are 2, and one's a little over a year old. They all play so good together, and I do have one spot open, part-time or full-time. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us in the conversation.
Yeah, of course.
The thing I love about God is He is so gracious and so good that no matter what your circumstance, no matter what your single journey or even your married journey is, this thing is redemptive. Life is redemptive. And, I look at that sweet boy that Jaclyn has and I think, man, I'm so glad that boy is in the world today. He is the cutest, most wonderful little man. And so I just want to speak life into you. I want to say there is hope for you no matter what your situation might be, whether you're struggling in your sexual purity or whether you're just considering all this and you're going, what is right for me right now? I believe the Lord can reveal that to you. There is no shame. There is no condemnation in Jesus Christ. He just has grace for you, and grace is that ability to change you. And so I just ask you to take that step of faith, and I just want to pray over you that you are able to be empowered to make the choices that you need to make in your life. God, I pray for each person listening here that they will not rule out anything that you're calling them to, whether it's calling them into celibacy, whether it's calling them into waiting for their husband, or whether it's calling them into even the unknown, that they don't know what their life is going to look like, but they're entrusting it to you this very moment. I ask that hearts and minds would be shifted and that they would find people around them that would encourage them, that would strengthen them, and that they could come to a place where they would know that they are completely whole individuals and people who can love and be loved by you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, don't forget to like and share this video. This can really be an encouragement to some people who think, what am I supposed to be doing in my single journey? What route is for me? And I really want to encourage you, if you are single, there is hope. God is with you. He will let you know what that true identity that you have in Him really is. And, I'd love to talk to you if you have different ideas, if you want to discuss things. We actually started a live group that's actually private. So you can go on and you can talk and you can have conversations within this group that don't necessarily need to be broadcast to the entire world. But I really wanted to create an atmosphere where we could have real conversations, we could really challenge one another, we could have different points of view, but we remain respectful. And I think we can really change the world with these conversations. So if you'd like to join me online, I'm doing a Facebook Live group. Just go find me on Facebook, Leigh Sloan, and then go find my Brave Conversations group and just request to join. And as long as you're respectful, we'll go ahead and keep you on there. I would love to have you. It's every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Alaska time. I hope you can do this, and I hope you can actually extend that conversation out to your community so that we can begin to have a more unified and loving nation, and we can learn from each other, not just fight one another. I really think that there is hope for us if we can be committed to Brave Conversations.